So good morning. We're going to talk a little bit about decontamination today. And again, this is for the COVID-19 extended break where our classes are not meeting together. So I'm going to talk a little bit about it. I'm also going to post your a PowerPoint presentation on the E360 page, so make sure you check that out as well. Okay. So first of all, decontamination, what is it, right? I put this in your stuff. Decon is the process of making people, equipment, and the environment safe from hazardous material contaminants. That's the basic of it. The more you know about this, how it happens, how to clean it up, the better. All you have to do is flip on the TV or check Twitter or whatever. You're going to find that there is a conversation happening currently. While not generally thought of as a hazmat, at least you're probably not thinking about it, COVID-19 is requiring lots of decontamination. So some of the instances I'm going to talk about today have to do with that specifically. So let's see, the basics decontamination are relatively simple. The overarching sort of lesson that you need to pull from this little quick lecture here is if contact with a contaminant can be controlled and minimized, the need for decontamination can also be reduced. So basically what we're trying to do is take care of as many potential risks as possible, right? If we wear gloves, the risk of us getting something on our hands drops down considerably, and that's what this idea of decon looks like. If we can wash it off, then problem is somewhat solved. Decon needs to be an adaptive and flexible process that respects the hazards and the behavior of the contaminants. Understand, and this is something that you hear the hazmat techs say all the time, you have to respect this stuff because it can bite you. The hazards and risks presented by the incident will define the scope, nature, and complexity of what's required in the decontamination process. Decontamination in any form of hazardous material is any form of hazardous material that physically remains on people, animals, or objects. So this is why I'm bringing up this idea of COVID-19. It's all over the board, but when they checked that one of the cruise ships, they found that it was like, I want to say 10, 12 days that some of that COVID-19 was staying on some of the surfaces. So you need to understand, you have to understand the COVID-19, but you also have to understand how it interacts with the either the solid areas that it hits, how long it remains on people, animals, and stuff. Direct contamination occurs when a person comes in direct contact with a contaminant, or when a person comes into contact with an object that has contaminant on it. COVID-19 again. So if I walk into a store, I grab the handle, open it up, and someone with COVID-19 had a hold of the handle, that's direct contamination. For instance, or they cough in my face, something like that. When I order a pizza from a takeout and they bring it home, and someone who had the COVID-19 on their hands, they're now touching my pizza box, I bring it home and I put it on my countertop, and then I put a cup of iced tea on it. Now the cup of iced tea potentially has COVID-19 on the bottom of it. That is sort of secondary contamination. Cross-contamination occurs when a person who is already contaminated makes contact with a person or object that is not contaminated, i.e. the door. Cross-contamination is typically the result of poor site management and control, inadequate decon and site safety procedures, and or failure to follow safety procedures. This is what you see over and over and over again. If people aren't following the rules, if they're not taking care of protecting themselves, we have a higher likelihood that someone is going to be impacted or infected. What about exposure? Exposure means that a person has been subjected to a toxic substance or harmful physical agent through any route entry into the body. Inhalation, which is what we're seeing in COVID-19, ingestion, injection, or direct contact, right, where skin on skin. The safety and health hazards of contaminants at any incident will define how complex the operations are going to be. If it's something that doesn't require much in the way of safety, then it's going to the complexity of the incident is going to drop considerably. But if it's life or death, i.e. COVID-19, then you are going to have a much more complex. I'm watching on the news these men and women who are in hospitals getting ready to go in to do a treatment, and it's taking them 10, 15 minutes just to get their stuff on. They go in for, in some cases, 30, 40 seconds just to check on the person, and all that has to be doffed. That's another thing. Donning is putting it on, doffing is taking it off. Just a side note, your text says this, and I want the people in the field say it. The easier to clean up, the less complex. And so if something's easy, the complexity drops. Best field decontamination procedures emphasize the need to confine contaminants to a limited area. Establishing a designated decon corridor and/or contamination and decontamination area are the first steps in limiting the spread of contaminants. This is why you have a video this week. One of your assignments is to watch this video that has the donning and doffing process, what this looks like in the case of, and in this case it's a group of firefighters who are doing the training, but you get the idea. I think I'm gonna lose my battery, so I'm about to plug this in here, so forgive me for a moment. There's no universal decon method that will work for every hazmat incident every time. We have rituals that we sort of do to control, but again, it's all based on variables. So if a particular hazmat or particular sort of response area, regardless of the number of decontamination steps required, decon is most effective when it's carried out by a trained decon team using multiple cleaning stations. Multiple cleaning stations allows for duplication of services, right? If I'm scrubbing you with a scrub brush, I want to make sure someone else, one or two other people, are also doing it so nothing's missed. The pathway is from the hot zone into the decon area with the exit point near the warm zone or cold zone. We call it the interface where they meet. The decontamination corridor should be clearly marked. Decon corridor, because people have to move from cold to hot, right? And so that area needs to be designated specific, and hazmat techs know this. Decontamination is labor intensive. This isn't something that's easy, and it shouldn't be. You shouldn't approach it like it's easy. It could take time, but remember, you're trying to clean off something that could be potentially deadly off a person, a place, or a thing. Multi-step decon operations can be broken into two broad phases: the gross decon and secondary decon. Gross decon meaning just a very general sort of maybe water, that sort of stuff. And then secondary sort of decon looks a little more specific based on the variables that you're encountering. Emergency decon can be innovative, but the most important concept is to clean the contaminated person as soon as possible, remembering the basics of flush, strip, flush, meaning cover them, completely get rid of any loose materials that could be on them, get them cleaned off of what they have, and then do it again. Soap and water is a near universal solution and should be applied in large quantities. Same thing with COVID-19. When acids or bases have contacted bare skin, the minimum amount of time for a water flush is at least 20 minutes. Again, this is not not time sensitive. We need to do what we need to do to save people's lives. Mass decontamination is established when large numbers of people or civilians need to be decontaminated at the scene of a hazmat emergency. The general goal here is to provide the greatest good to the greatest number of people in the shortest amount of time. Again, this is a gross decon. This isn't something where you are this isn't scalpel work. And so when you're doing this, understand that there are probably going to be people who are not completely decontaminated. You're doing what you can for the greatest amount of people in the quickest amount of time. A debriefing should be held for those involved in decon and cleanup as soon as practical. Responders and contractors involved in the operation should be provided as much information as possible about the delayed effects of the hazmat. So you don't want to give somebody, have them dealing with it and then not explain to them that they need to be watching for this, this, or this. Otherwise, you could be putting your own people in danger. And then, with that, and this is quick. This is a 10-minute little lecture, but I understand it's about the amount of time I can keep people's attention, especially on something like, decon. There's videos, there's additional resources for you to read. Again, this is going to take sort of a COVID-19 lean this week, but the lessons that you're learning about how to go after, diesel fuel spill is also applicable in large part to how to respond to a COVID-19 outbreak, right? They're both contaminants. They both need decontaminated for the safety of the people who are involved. So have a great week. We'll talk to you soon, and stay safe. Bye.